Well, good morning. Every time I have a day where I feel low self-esteem or feel down, I call Richard. And he perks me up, and I think if you have one of those days, please make sure that you have his number and you can call him. I do want to thank, first of all, Asia CEO Forum for inviting SBI Global to speak at this first of many of the talks this year. I also want to take a moment and recognize Richard and Rebecca. Those of you who come to their events, whether it's the ICD Awards or Asia CEO Awards, it's important that we give them a big round of applause for the recognition they bring to the Philippines, to the Philippines. I was asked to come here and give an update on the BPO industry, and I thought EPAP and CCAP do a great job doing that, and we all know the same numbers, we know the same challenges. So I thought, instead of talking about how the BPO industry is doing, take one of the topics that I believe is one of the biggest challenges facing the BPO industry as we look at the next 3 to 5 years. Oftentimes, we talk about the challenges that the Philippines will face looking for the frontline employees. How will we go from 750,000 people working in the industry today to 1.5 million employees working in 3 to 5 years down the road? But we don't hear a lot about how are we going to take today's team leaders to become tomorrow's managers? How are we going to take today's managers and mentor them so they become tomorrow's senior managers, directors? How are we going to take directors in today's world and make them a vice president, senior vice president? How are we going to take someone who is a vice president and one day have them become a CEO of an organization? So I thought I'll share some of the wisdom that I have gathered from the mentors that I have looked up to throughout my career, from my own reading as well as from my own experiences. And the title of the speech is the DNA of the next generation leader, and it's very misleading actually. The only reason he came up with that title is because it's very sexy, it's very catchy, and it allows Richard to fill up this hole. What I want to share with you, the 5 topics about what makes a good leader, is actually very timeless. These 5 topics have been tried and tested throughout the generations, and there is nothing new that we will come out with today. But I'm just going to put it in my context. I want you guys to see it from the lenses that I have seen so far in my career. So let's start with the first thing that a great leader does. As a leader, your first and foremost responsibility is to create. And there are 2 things you create as a leader. You create value, and you create vision. Let's talk about value. I always tell people that how far you go in an organization, if you are an aspiring person, if you're an ambitious person, you want to listen to this, how far you go in an organization depends on how much value you create for that organization, not how much time you put into that organization. How much value you create for that organization depends on the size of the challenge that you take on behalf of that organization. And the size of the challenge that you take on behalf of that organization depends on the quality of your team. John Maxwell once said that your team has to be greater than your dream. So coming back to value, how far you go in an organization depends on how much value you create. I oftentimes run into people who come to me and say, well, I've been with the company for 3 years. I've been coming to work every day. I've been doing everything you asked me to do. How come I'm not being promoted? How come I'm not going to the next level? So let me use a metaphor. Let's say you guys hired me a year ago, and you asked me to come to work every day and say, Maulik, your job is to move these 100 boxes from this corner of the room to that corner of the room. And I come to you a year later today and say, I've been doing this. I've been moving those boxes from one corner of the room to the other corner of the room every single day. I've been coming on time, and I'm doing everything that you expected me to be. Do you think I'm creating value for the organization? How many of you think I'm creating value? How many of you think I'm just doing my job? The value is created if I come to work a year later, and instead of 50 boxes or 100 boxes that I was supposed to move from one corner to the next, suddenly I'm moving 120 boxes in a day. And I'm doing it better, faster, and for less money. So that's the value you create at a frontline agent level, or a team leader level, or a manager level. As you go higher up in an organization, the value you create depends on the quality of the questions you ask about what you're doing. So if you want to be a director, the question you want to ask is, I've been coming to this room every day, and I'm moving these boxes from one corner to the next. I don't know how many other rooms are there where someone like me is doing the same thing. Can we create a bigger room, create more efficiency for the organization? If you are aspiring to be a vice president or senior vice president, EVP, you want to ask yourself, who else is moving the boxes in the industry? And are they better than you in moving the boxes? Are there opportunities and threats coming from the competitive landscape? And if you want to be a CEO, you want to ask, am I in the right business? Should I be in the business of moving boxes? Would I be relevant 3 to 5 years down the road? Would I be able to employ these people that I have with me today? You can take it further if you are in old soul and you think, who am I and what is the purpose of my life? I cannot help you. You may have to go to the spiritual ashram in India. The problem is they will probably make you move the boxes there anyway. You may feel one with the boxes, but you still have to move the boxes. You cannot run away from the boxes. So I want you guys to think about that metaphor as you think about whether you are generating value for your organization or not. The second thing leaders create is a vision. Nobody else is required in an organization to create a vision other than the leader. John Maxwell once said, many can steer the ship, but only leaders chart the course. Many can steer the ship, but only leaders can chart the course. Leaders would never allow you to float aimlessly in the middle of the ocean at the mercy of the ocean currents or the wind. When you're with a good leader, they will let you know where you're heading. They will let you know where the stake in the ground is. They will let you know what mountaintop you're going to climb into. I'll give you 2 examples. Richard actually talked about my previous company more than my current company. Ken Tuckman will be very happy. But when I joined Teletech in 2006, we had roughly 6,000 employees, as Richard said. And very quickly, a group of some 25 key leaders from the company, we got together in a leadership team setting, and we put our stake in the ground that, you know what, there are other BPO companies in the Philippines. They have 10,000 people. They're about to get to 15,000 people. I don't think our goal should be to get to 15,000 people. We should put a stake in the ground that we will get to 25,000 people by 2010. By the time I left in May of 2009, we almost had 23,000 3,000 people. When I joined SPI Global in 2009, as Richard mentioned, the revenues were flat for the previous 3 years. And very quickly, collectively as a team, we decided that the only way we can move the needle is put a stake in the ground that is so ambitious that will allow us to gain some energy from our employees. So we said, you know what, we are less than $200 million in revenue today. Let's put a stake in the ground that we want to get to $500 million by 2016. Since we have done that, we have increased our revenue by 30%. We are well on our way to get to that $500 million mark that we want to get to. So the point is, the first thing you want to do as a leader is to really put a stake in the ground as to where you want to take your organization, whether it's a business unit, your department, a company that you're running to. So I'll leave you with this question. In your organization, have you put that stake in the ground as to where you want your organization to go? The next thing I want to talk about as a leader is great leaders have an amazing ability to get everyone focused on a common goal. I talk about setting up a vision, putting a stake in the ground. That's an easy part. It's very easy for a leader to say, you know what, we're going to go towards $500 million in revenue by 2016. The tough part is, how do you take 18,000 people with you and you arrive at the same mountaintop at the same time? What I've noticed is, the higher up you go into the organization, the people you're working with, your team members, are highly accomplished. They have had years of experience. They have achieved so much. They have AEOs. They're highly opinionated. Some of them want to go in their own direction. And some of them will all go in their own direction at the same speed, or maybe a different speed. And I think as a leader, it's your job to get everybody together, going towards the same goal at the same speed. A good metaphor I want to leave you with is, think about a symphony orchestra. You know, symphony orchestra is made up of probably the best musicians in any given location. And individually, they know how to play their instrument better than anybody else in that community. They know what they are doing. So why do you think you need a conductor in a symphony orchestra? When I was young, I was always wondering, what is this crazy looking guy doing in front of a symphony orchestra? But if you don't have a conductor, the outcome is going to be what? Most likely noise. It's conductor's job to make sure that people are playing the music from the same sheet of music, and they're playing with the same tempo that everybody else is. You guys agree? Yeah. So ask yourself, in your organization, in your role, are you busy playing an instrument? And when you are listening to the music coming from your group, is it the noise or is it the symphony? Okay. The third thing great leaders do is anticipate. And I want to do a maritime quiz here, just to make sure that you guys are still with me. I know it's dark out there. Don't want anybody to fall asleep. I can see David Mitchell almost. I'm losing him. And SPI Global people cannot participate because I did that quiz for them 2 months ago and all of them flunked. So no second chances. How many of you have heard of, and by the way, this quiz, the questions will be very easy in the beginning and then we'll get tough, okay? So how many of you, to start with a very easy question, how many of you have heard of Titanic? Can I see some self hands? Yeah. What happened to it? It sunk. How did it sink? It hit iceberg, right? So all easy Titanic spotted the iceberg to the moment Titanic hit the iceberg. If you saw the movie, it was too long, because they had love and song and dance going on. When the real life. Anybody has a guess?
Very short. 30 minutes.
30 minutes? Not very long.
Yes,
Not enough. I heard 30 minutes. Yeah. It was 37 seconds. And I always, since I saw this special on National Geographic last year, it was the 100th anniversary for the Titanic mishap, I keep reminding myself of this Titanic story because there is a huge lesson for all the leaders in the business world. On April 11th, Titanic departed with over 2,200 people on board from Ireland going towards New York City. And the first 3 days, everything is going smooth, weather is nice, Leonardo and Kate are falling in love, they're doing their song and dance. But on April 14th, things start changing. As they approach this place called the Corner in the southeast of Newfoundland, Canada, they start getting these warning signals from other ships in the region that they have spotted icebergs. So there was a warning signal. The air is getting chillier, which is another leading indicator that there may be some ice in the water, and there is ice in the water, there is a potential for iceberg to be in the water as well. The crew and the captain of Titanic completely ignores these warning signs. They decide to go full-fledged ahead without any change in the course. Captain goes to sleep at 9 p.m. Titanic hits the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. 3 hours later, the unsinkable ship of its era, on its maiden voyage, completely sinks, taking with it over 1,500 people. So as leaders of your organizations and our organizations, we are the captains of our ship. And our primary responsibility is to anticipate and to look out for any potential dangers lurking in the future in the horizon. I always tell people that when they get promoted and they go to the next level in their organization, the hardest thing for them to do is to go from this urgent and important issues that they're driving towards, that they're busy with, to move into the not urgent and important quadrant. This is what I call the captain's deck, because when you're in the captain's deck, you're not dealing with the day-to-day crisis in the engine room or the boat room. You're out there looking through the binocular in the future as to what is ahead. Are you making sure that everybody on the ship is safe or not? And the reason people have difficulty getting to the captain's deck is because it's lonely out there. It's fun to be in the engine room and your buddies are there, you're having fun. And it's not as busy in the captain's deck. Sometimes, you go to the captain's deck and you're wondering, what am I doing here? Because you're used to going from one meeting to the next, replying to one email to the next, putting off one fire to the next, averting one crisis to the next. In the captain's deck, there are no crises. Your job is to avoid the crisis. So the question I want to leave you with is, in your job, how much time do you spend in the captain's deck looking out for potential opportunities as well as potential threats? The next one is stretch. When you're with a good leader, they don't let you feel comfortable. You can never be complacent. They're always pushing you out of your comfort zone. Just when you think you arrived at your destination, they're pointing at another mountain that you should be going towards. I have a great example. One of my mentors is Charlie Irvin, chairman of Dish Network. I worked at Dish Network for 5 years. And some of the best learnings I got in the business world came from the few hours and few days I had access to Charlie. He used to actually tell me that I should be paying him for the education that he was giving me versus him paying me the salary. And at that time I thought he was crazy. Looking back, I agree, although I'm not going to send any checks to him yet. One of the things I learned from him was you never settle for anything less than perfection. He used to have this monthly meeting with some 40 key executives at Dish Network. He would call everybody in on last Saturday of the month. And from 8 in the morning until we are finished, one by one we go to get in front of him, in front of everybody else as well, and present how our business is doing, what are the market trends, what the future is. And no matter how much we try to cover every single angle, preparing for that meeting, every single time he'll come up with 600 other questions that we never thought about. Spending time with him was like watching a basketball game in a basketball arena. You're watching the game from your angle, and Charlie is watching that same game from 36 different angles. So he taught me the lesson that there are many ways of looking at the same situation, and you should not be focused on only one aspect of the business problem that you're facing. One of the questions that I will leave you with is, when you are dealing with your employees, how often do you show some tough love to your employees? Take them to that cliff, push them off that cliff. They may hate your guts when you're doing it, but you know that if you push them off the cliff, they're going to fly because you believe in them. And if they don't fly, you're down there at the valley with your arms stretched, ready to catch them. Stanley McChrystal, one of the top commanders in Afghanistan for US, said, "Leaders let you fail, but yet not let you become a failure." Leaders let you fail. I really found that amazing, because I'm always, these people are smiling here because I'm always pushing them off the cliff all the time. But leaders let you fail, but never let you become a failure. So ask yourself how often you're willing to show that tough love to your employees, because I know eventually they'll get better and your organization is going to get better because of that. The last one that I want to leave you with is inspire, not because it has SDI in it. Since Richard didn't mention much about SDI, I have to do my own plugging here. People often confuse motivating and inspiring. There is a huge difference between the two. When you're inspired, let me start with that angle. When you're motivated, you get hold of an idea outside of you and you go after it. When you are inspired, an idea within you gets hold of you and doesn't give up until you achieve that goal. When you are motivated, that idea is an external object, it's material. It's a bigger bonus, bigger car, bigger house, bigger office. When you're inspired, that idea is something that is so deep within you. It's your innermost desire to make a difference in the world that we live in. It is your desire to leave this world better than what you found when you came in. When you're motivated, the rewards are material in nature. When you are inspired, the rewards are emotional or spiritual in nature. When you are motivated, you feel happy in your mind. Only temporarily, because your mind plays tricks, right? As soon as you get a big car, you're like, okay, what's the next fancy car that you get? But when you're inspired, you feel happy in your heart. And that happiness is long-lasting. So how do you inspire others? And how do you inspire yourself? I believe the best way to inspire others is to create an environment where people can manifest their deepest, their true nature. You know, every one of us has a superhero within us. We all have that superhero or superheroine that wants to make a difference in this world, that wants to leave a lasting legacy behind. And it is leaders' job to tap into the superhero powers by resonating with the people at the deepest level. You know, when Ninoy Aquino said Filipinos are worth dying for, he galvanized the whole nation of superheroes by resonating with their deepest sense of self-worth. Now, luckily in the business world, you don't have to die or put your life at risk. But you can inspire others by creating a work environment that people find inspiring to be working with. One of the examples that I would like to give you here is last year on March 10, 2012, collectively as a leadership team, we put a challenge in front of STI Global 18,000 employees that in one day, in 24 hours, we would like to generate 15,000 hours of community service. By putting that challenge, we resonated with everyone's deepest desire to make a difference in the community and the people they come in touch with on a day-to-day basis. We got an amazing response. We ended up with 20,000 hours of community service in one day. So ask yourself, how do you get into people's hearts versus just people's mind in your job when you're leading them to the next level? The last thing I want to leave you with is, how do you inspire yourself? You cannot inspire others unless you are inspired yourself. You know, we live in a world where we are constantly bombarded by this external stimuli, whether it's a Twitter feed from Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian or Ann Curtis. I'm not following any of them, by the way. My assistant is, and I know what's going on with them. We go for it. Or we are busy keeping up with the newsfeed on the Facebook. We keep liking people's profile pictures as they keep changing it. But how often you took a moment of solitude and go deep within you to hear that faint voice that is a Twitter feed from your source that tells you what the purpose is for your life? How often do you go deep within you and look at that dim picture? The picture of your profile, the picture that shows the best that you can be, and be inspired by it. So the question I will leave you with, in your busy life, how often are you taking a moment of silence, moment of solitude, and going deep within you to find that inspiration that already exists within your heart? Thank you.
Good. Please stay up. We'll have some questions and so forth. But I didn't speak too much about SBI because I wanted Maulik to do that. But if I can tell you one story, it does have a good history. And I know it was started by another guy who was actually a missionary, Alan Fraser, and he started it years ago and built it up. But the culture is is a very tight one, and just one quick story here. Years ago, or a few years ago, there was a gal who did many years with the organization, and it was her life and all this kind of stuff, but she was retiring and made a public announcement and so forth. And so I called her up and said, well, I shouldn't mention her name, but I don't think she'd mind, and I said, I understand you're retired, you made it public, and maybe we could have a cup of coffee, because there are some other companies who would be interested to speak with you about the next stage of your career. And it was only a couple of years to go, a couple of months to go, until she was finishing off. And she said, well, but Richard, I just couldn't do that. It wouldn't be loyal to the company, and what if some of my staff found out? They might have the wrong impression and stuff like this. You're retiring, you need a new job, but this is the kind of the culture. So Maulik inherited a good, strong group, and there's a continuing future ahead, so it's very exciting. But one question I have is, on the leadership side, certainly Maulik has very high regard for Filipinos. I think this is clear. He seems to have chosen his career for the foreseeable future, but and lots of success in places. But are there areas for improvement that you can see, or are they already perfect as they are?
They're very close to perfect. As we said, you never get to a destination, right? You are always working on yourself. I believe that the biggest challenge everyone faces, not just the Filipinos, but Indians, Americans, etc., is from our culture we bring certain way of working in an environment, and we should be open to learning from other cultures. I think typically, I'm going to stereotype my own country here, but generally when you're dealing with Indians, they tend to be pushy, they tend to be very analytical, they tend to be demanding. And I was like that 10 years ago, but I think having worked in the Philippines, I have been rounded by the softness and the kindness of the people that I've been with. And I think Filipinos, on the other hand, have to work on being tough and standing your ground when you're living in a global setting.
Very good. Question, run down here. I think we didn't put microphones up. Michael Holmes.
Thank you, Richard. Maulik, you mentioned in one of your analogies was having the conductor to lead the team. How do you go about choosing that conductor? And if you have a team, as you said, of very entrepreneurial managers, how do you get them to recognize that the conductor is the right one?
Okay, I'm slippery.
That's a great question. Just because of the nature of what a conductor does, he's not a master of any of the instrument, but he knows a little bit about every single instrument. What he brings to the table is his ability or her ability to listen to a group of musicians playing music and making sure it comes across as a symphony and not noise. So a good way to find a good conductor is someone who has the ability to go from being a line management into general management, because a conductor is a general management role. Yeah.
Okay. Well, could we ask Maulik, can you say anything about the future of SPI and its ownership and things like that? Are you able?
Future is great.
How often do you get Maulik? Oh yeah, please. Okay, well, then there is a microphone just right there, my dear.
You mentioned about having a team that's greater than your vision. So my question now is, of course, when you select a team, they are supposed to really cluster on that vision. But how much time do you give certain members if some are not catching up?
Some of them are not catching up.
That's always a challenge. We need a better conductor here. You never end up with the perfect team to begin with. So you have two choices. Keep investing in those team members until they become part of your dream and they can carry their own weight. But there is a moment in time where you cannot afford to spend any more energy and effort because they have gotten to their level and they are not going to go any further. So it's a combination of both giving them the time and effort, mentoring them as much as they can. And then when you realize that they have arrived at a potential that they will then go beyond, then you have to make a decision to perhaps get a replacement.
Very good. What a shy bunch today. Oh, okay. Please, come on up. Yeah, they're a quiet bunch too.
Hi, good morning.
My own guys are going to put me on the spot here.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned something about the difficulty of a junior manager coming from an everyday, putting out the fires into something which looks a little bit more to the future. In your experience, how does an executive group encourage those line managers, those junior managers, to step away from always being, firefighters into people who look a little bit more forward, not always trying to put out all the fires?
It's a great question because it's very easy to say, it's very hard to do. I always tell people that in the presence of a leader, there should not be any crisis. So one of the first things I tell my team members is that if you're allowing a crisis to happen, that means we failed somewhere. And you have to keep repeating that message to your team members. You also have to mentor them and perhaps give them access to your own life and how you spend your work life, spending most of your energy and time looking out for potential dangers versus fighting fires. And once they get used to that, it becomes very easy then for them to start spending 10, 20, 30% of their time into that not urgent but important part. But it's one of those things that won't happen overnight. As I said, it's the biggest challenge people have when you promote them. They are so comfortable going back to where they came from. How do you pull them out and say, you have a different job now, you need to look out. Part of your job is to make sure that your team has a job, has ability to go to the next level without any dangers forcing you in the wrong direction.
Maulik, you spoke today about how to make great leaders. My question to you is a little different, and I think you've gone through this. Is once you've created the great leaders, and they are parachuted on the move to a new organization or a new team, what are the main tenets to make themselves acceptable and successful in a new team?
It's a good question. There's a saying that success comes when you achieve great things. Significance comes when you achieve great things with others. And legacy comes when they achieve great things without you, right? So the purpose of a leader is to ensure that they have mentored these leaders to the point where they are now self-actualized themselves. They have found their own voice, that Twitter feed coming from their own source, that allows them to go to the next organization and take them to the next level. So it's really that passion and inspiration comes from within that leader. And your job as a leader is to allow that leader to go inside of themselves and find that inspiration, because me telling them anything is not going to change their life. They will have to find that purpose in life themselves and then take that to the next organization they're working with. Does that answer?